Hello everybody and welcome back. My name's Deborah Hatswell. Thank you very much for joining me today while I share some of the case files from BBR Investigations. I am often asked to do talks or share information on the subject of British Bigfoot, and that happens so often. I'm currently writing a book about my experiences, the witnesses I've met over the years, and I hope in the book to also share many of the things that I've learned along the way. It's been a while since I did a British Bigfoot podcast, so while I'm at home resting after my hand operation, I figured it was time I passed on a few things that I've theorised or patterns that I've picked up on over the years. I hope they might spark some ideas of your own or something new you can try when you're next out in the woods. Now, for the sake of this chat, I'll be covering Bigfoot and wildman accounts from all sides of the dice. Whether he is flesh and blood, dimensional, or another being entirely is not what's important here. I'm merely hoping to share some experiences with you and some examples of what I mean, whilst also answering some of the frequently asked questions that we all have about this subject as a whole. I'll also share some reports that feature each theory as we discuss them. If I shared everything I know, we'd still be here at Easter, so let's call this part 1 in a never-ending series. Now, if you're listening to this on the podcast and you don't have video facilities, or if you want to look at the images yourselves or analyse them, I've added a link to the BBR website in the description below. So let's start with one of the most annoying parts of research, the endless supply of stick structures that are presented as Bigfoot dens and the like. Now, for all I'm not an expert on every single stick in the wood, I have over the past few decades learned a great deal about what signs weather predation has on our woodlands, and also in human and animal patterns as they move through that woodland. 99% of the images shared with me are simple. They're normally weather damaged, just signs left behind by animals doing their natural behaviour, or the signs that us humans leave behind by the camping, foraging, or traipsing the dog through the wood. I realised very early on in my career that networking and sharing information really is the only way forward when you investigate the kind of cases that come into BBR. Of course, in the beginning, my research was a simple search for a reason to put away any fear or interest I held in the creature I saw in 82. I wanted a simple explanation that would explain it all away. That never happened. And 41 years later, I've amassed an enormous amount of data, images, and research. I've also amassed hundreds of friends and fellow investigators that I speak to often. I have one friend in the south who has researched our wildman, his habits, and his preferred areas, and more importantly, how they traverse or move through an area. Like commandos or marines, they know their territory in a way that is foreign to a human. We see only at eye level and think in a very insular way. We follow the path laid out for us, seldom leave it. For the woos, it's very different. They know the topography of an area, each turn, each hill, each rise. They use this knowledge to stay hidden in plain sight, like an Amazon tribesman or a caveman would have done. They'll also lay a false trail to encourage you in the wrong direction. And they also seem to interact or use trees and their boughs and as an almost fluid language. Steve, one of my friends who I was telling you about, also raised the possibility that the structures are left almost as people magnets. Are we meant to stop and be interested in them? As I said, there is an almost language to this, a language none of us understand, but we recognise it when we see it. For instance, the image that you're seeing now was sent to me by Billy, who's an Irish investigator. It was filmed in Cavan, in Ireland, in the summer of 2023. Billy visited the woodland after a series of strange events and serendipities that led him there, and he found a number of strange teepee-like structures. It was at a later date he looked at the photographs back at home, and he noticed a strange figure that seemed to have blended in with the background. That day, Billy had no idea he was being watched. He was merely confronted by something he found unusual, in this case, a teepee structure. He photographed it from all angles, and he went on his way. Now, the structure could also be made for a different reason. A number of people have now proved that a simple selection of sticks pushed into the ground can alter a mobile phone, radio, or EMF signal. How this is possible, I have no idea, but I've seen it with my own eyes. So these teepees or wooden pyramids seem to be placed in areas of shifting earth energy. They could be tapping the magnetic energy that surrounds us all. Now, I wondered if I was a creature and this structure had its significance for me, what would I do if I heard a human coming in my direction? Well, I'd simply melt into the undergrowth and watch until they leave. So I suggested to a few people that when they come across something like this teepee, not only to take photographs of it, but stand at the structure and take images looking away from it in the hopes of catching a figure, as I believe Billy did. Many years ago, after I met Adam Bird, the original founder of the British Bigfoot Facebook group and website, we spent countless hours visiting anywhere we could in the hopes of finding answers as to what these structures should be, whether we should rule them out or whether they were real anomalies. It was on a visit to Stapleford Woods after a couple named Kerry and Brett made a report of a strange animal that Adam experienced something strange, is the only way I can put it. The Chimp-like Thing. Now, the email from a woman named Kerry concerning a sightseeing she and her husband Brett had in Stapleton Woods, a 750-acre area of forest on the Nottinghamshire-Lincolnshire border, was brought to the attention of Adam Bird. Both Kerry and Brett saw the animal at the same time, but they didn't have some very different opinions as to what they'd seen and experienced. Now, the couple were taking their 2-year-old Jack Russell dog named Kiwi for a walk in the woodland. They often use that wood when they heard what they described as a high-pitched screech. Realising the screech wasn't that far, Brett set off in its direction and investigated further. Brett was surprised to see some kind of dark animal that was walking through the trees. He quickly called over Kerry, who picked up Kiwi in fear. Kerry described the animal as follows. She said, "I don't know what it was, what we saw. I'm confused on that. But whatever it was walking on all fours, like a dog would. But it wasn't a dog. It was walking in an odd way, sort of lumbering along. Now, I know there are reports of big cats in the area, so I was certain it was a large cat, maybe a panther. Because what else could it be?" said Kerry. Now, Brett saw the same thing, but he had a different idea on what it was and what it looked like. He said it was about 5 feet long, with a sharp, pointy head. The hair was short, and he could see patches of bare skin through it, like it was losing its hair somehow. Kerry said, "My husband wanted to follow it as it walked away deeper into the trees, but I stopped him. It scared me, and I thought it might be dangerous." When I asked Brett if it was some kind of wild cat, he said no. He got the impression it was more like a monkey or an ape. It had a shape similar to an orangutan or a chimpanzee, but with stronger, more solid arms and muscles like a bear. Kerry just assumed it was a big cat. She said, "But now when I think back on it, I didn't see a tail, and it didn't move like a cat would. It could have been an injured cat maybe, but my husband says it was like an ape." We looked on Facebook to try and see if anyone else had seen it or something like it, and we came across your Bigfoot page. Now, while big cat sightings have been reported in Stapleton Woods, this account sparked our interest because of the unusual description and the odd way that this animal walked, and also the lack of tail. Now, Brett said that it was definitely an ape, so Adam decided to go out and have a look at the area and conduct a daylight search, which I would definitely suggest. Many people believe that to go Bigfoot hunting or investigating, you need to go in the depths of night. I'm not a big believer in that because you can't see anything at night. I think it's better to go in the daytime. You might be able to pick up paths that you won't see at night, breaks and twists and strange anomalies that you won't see at night. So, as I said, Adam decided to go out and have a look in the area. When he got there, it was completely quiet. Stapleford Woods is around 750 acres in size. and Adam made a search of the area of the forest where he carried out footprint searches, but nothing of interest was found. But he did come across a strange little structure. It was made up of some sticks. One stick had been snapped and seemingly carefully placed, and it was resting on another stick on the ground. Now, nothing else of interest was found, so Adam left. When Adam was photographing the area, he took a number of images of the strange sticks, but also looking out from them and the woods themselves. It was presented in the group, and somebody noticed that in the background there seemed to be a figure watching them as they worked. So, I hear the skeptics ask, why would a creature be in a local scrap of wood rather in, say, the Highlands or the Peak District? Well, they probably are in the Highlands or the Peak District. But if these creatures need to eat, breed and stay healthy and undetected like early man, they would probably have different foraging routes they use yearly, covering many miles. As modern man, we would often have seasonal camps, stay in for around a few weeks and then on to the next area. It's how you keep the wildlife population healthy rather than depleted. That scrappy bit of woods close to work or where you walk your dog, no doubt, as a seasonal food source. Or it's the only patch of woods left now from the once bountiful forest that it used to be. As we encroach more and more on the land, we leave behind our buildings, our roads, our hospitals, and we leave them very little space. And you get close proximity of Bigfoot and witness, you're going to get inevitable sightings, and that's what seems to be happening. One tip I would learn is what these food resources are, rather than trying to identify every stick and bough that seems unusual. Food sources have a pattern. They come up at certain times of the year. There are hundreds of wild edibles out there, from spruce tips to filberts. Knowing a plant's life cycle can clue you into a possible route of travel, maybe narrow down your research area dramatically, and also give you a clue as to what time of the year those woodlands might be busy. Now, there are documented reports from people who've seen wild men and Bigfoot not only hunting or foraging, but also eating. Now, in Leigh, Somerset, August 17, 2015, a Bristol resident said that he witnessed an ape-like creature as he ate a piece of food in what he believes may have been an improvised eating utensil. I actually spoke to Harry, and what he was trying to say, and it didn't come across well in the newspaper report, that he was basically using the sticks to just pick up the meat and eat it. Harry is 58, he's a retired man from Somerset, and he's worked in the woods his entire life. And he said that he was walking through Leigh Woods on August 17, 2015, when the strange event took place. Now, Leigh Woods is a nature reserve, and he said, I usually take my dog, but lately I've avoided taking her there because she's been getting very skittish for some unknown reason. As I was walking along, I suddenly began hearing noises, as if someone was snapping twigs, making a squeaky sound. I thought it may have been a deer off in the brush, so I went off the path to look. And this is when I saw this strange ape-like creature. It was sitting in the brambles, digging in the earth with a twig. It did this for about 5 minutes. Then it picked something up and began eating it. At one point, it started doing something with the twigs. It was crossing them over on top of each other. All in all, I watched this thing for about 25 minutes. It was only when it stood up and walked off that I got up and also left. Jeff was too scared to move when it was there, and I don't blame him. When it stood up, he said it grabbed a large tree branch and it snapped it off quite easily. It then leaned that tree branch against another tree. Then it walked off and he never saw it again. I asked him what it looked like, and he said, I'd say it was about 6 feet tall. It was old looking, had grey skin. I could see that it had human features, but its face looked more ape-like, and it had a broader nose and cheeks, and its jaw jutted out, and it looked like it were curved. It looked like a prehistoric man from the land that time forgot, you know, the old Doug McClure film. It was covered in hair, which had black streaks in it, but it was mostly grey. It wasn't a horse or a dog or anything like that. It was like an ape man. It was like a man living wild, a Neanderthal, or something similar. Now, there are several other cases where there is a sighting of the wild man eating. Not only eating, but sometimes searching waterways for edibles or taking branches or fruits from nearby trees. There's a report in Dartmoor where the wild man caught a squirrel or a bird after knocking it out of a tree, and it quickly shoved it into its mouth. In the northeast of England, a driver on a school bus saw a large hairy creature bend down and pick something up from the side of the road, and it then put it into its mouth. There was somebody down south, I remember, in the year we had the floods, I think it was 2021, and they saw a woodwoose, as they described it, looking in a flooded field, and it looked like it was moving things with its foot, almost as if it was foraging for food. Well, I can't tell you how many reports like this there are, because I'd have to sit down and do the maths. But I can tell you we have a majority of reports that are found around water and fishing spots. So, maybe the wild man uses these spots too. We have reports of them close to the beach or coastline, which would make sense. Salt and an abundance of fresh and saltwater bounty can be had in just one step onto the beach. In our next section, I'm going to combine the question, do they have young, with the question of do they observe us, what we touched about earlier. A very good friend of mine and fellow investigator Stu Hill was also taking photographs of some strange finds in his research area just a few years ago, when he too caught sight of something in one of his images. Now, Stu visits the same area often. He knows its patterns, and he knows when he's welcome and when he's not. You'll hear that from other people. You'll hear them mention that a sudden onset of dread, or they get this knowledge that they're unwelcome in an area where they usually feel safe. It may give us some insight into why at certain times of the year we really are unwelcome. There must be times when they are vulnerable, when they're sick or need to give birth. And an intruding human in the area is very unwelcome. It's said that sticks, stones, and pine cones are often thrown, or in some cases, we can be within feet of them and not notice anything amiss. That's how adept they are at hiding in plain sight. On this day, Stu had been in the forest for a while. He did his usual routine of sitting under the same tree, having a flask of coffee while he unwound. He'd get lost in thought, and if you wait, the woods suddenly come alive. Stu had several strange experiences here, and it was only on a few occasions each year that he felt unwelcome. He finished his walk around that day and packed up to go home when he took some quick shots. When checking them at home, a dark anomaly can be seen crouching at the bottom of a tree using the grass to hide. Further analysis seemed to reveal a large dark figure holding a much smaller figure, as I would hold my young, close to my chest. Now, Stu knows, even when you think you're getting nowhere, week after week, in reality, you can be far closer than you realise. Now, a man driving at 1 a.m. on the road to Taynuilt in 2016, close to Loch Awe, saw what he described as a wild father and son hunting deer at the side of the road. He said they were very similar in looks, but one was much smaller than the other, and he got the impression that they were father and son. The older creature ran out of the trees and chased the deer across the road, but the younger, smaller creature went back into the trees and hid. A woman driving her car through Sherwood Forest reported a similar couple at the side of the road. She saw them as she left the tree line as she was travelling home from work in 2013. She said, they were just stood within the trees. I'm going to be honest and say their appearance really scared me. They were really tall and naked and looked like a caveman of some kind. The big one stood about 6.5 feet tall and was clearly male. I could see his sexual parts. This male was covered in hair, which was brown in colour. It had no clothing on it at all. The witness has something to add. She said that they both had something strange about their appearance. They had weird-shaped heads, like a deformed skull. They were very apish, almost like a chimp, but the face looked almost human too. I'd describe them as very manlike. The other, smaller one was much shorter, only about 3 feet tall, and had less hair on its body than the adult one. The little one looked the same as the bigger one. It was just younger and smaller. It had a deformed head for a human, but it still had a human face within it. She said, "I don't know how to explain it to you. It's very hard to put into words." In Dorset, a poacher saw a family of creatures traverse the woodland when he was waiting for daylight in his search for rabbits for the pot. He described seeing 4 figures that he said were large, a large male out front, a smaller adult, and 2 much shorter figures. The large one would walk a distance, stop, listen, and then with a gesture he would beckon the other individuals to follow. There's a case in an area known as Snake Wood, where a whole family of wild creatures were seen several times by local boys who would play in the area. So it does seem that there are reports here and in the US, Russia, and many other places I can think of, where small, juvenile creatures are spotted or reported. So we've touched on one of the givens in life, which is birth, isn't it? So let's look at the age-old question of where do they go when they die, and why don't we find the bodies? And my honest answer is, I don't know. I can only share with you what little knowledge I have on the topic. I believe, like all hominids on the earth, the dead are simply buried. Now, when I say buried, I don't mean in the way that we do it, like the whole 6-foot hole with a mound of dirt kind of thing. I think something far more natural takes place. Do you remember the stories of old where an ancient druid or a Native American would sense death was near and they'd go to their favourite place and just sit under a tree and choose to die? They make the journey, they sit down and simply fade away. Nature takes the body back into the earth via the animals and the creatures that predate on all dead things. It is the circle of life, no less. In some cases, the loved ones may help in the burial by placing it under a fallen tree, deep into a rock crevice or cave. I once asked a primatologist how many dead or naturally injured primates had he found, and his answer was none. And this man's been in the business for almost 50 years. He said the bodies that he'd seen were all killed or injured by man. In April of last year, a man experienced the most terrifying account we have to date here in the UK. Robert Manton was wild camping in Wales when he was picked as a victim for a creature he believed to be a skinwalker. Now, I have got an interview coming up with Robert at a later date that I know you'll enjoy. Robert said that he was saved from that skinwalker by a number of what he called sash-type creatures. In the battle that happened, the older female sash was killed, and her body was placed in a sitting position at the bottom of the tree. The account is both horrific and deeply moving at the same time. The female sash was heroic, but sadly it ended in her death. The young female urged Robert to leave, as she felt the clan members would turn on him and blame him for her mother's death. Robert said, "The young creature that was protecting me, you could tell she was female, and she was close to my height at 6 feet tall. And I assumed the other 2 were her parents. Both parents were around 8 to 9 feet tall. Their fur reminded me of the fur chimps had. It's fine, but thick and protective. You could see very defined muscles. For a size example, their thighs were like 3 times the size of mine. All this happened in moonlight. Their fur just looked black to me. It covered them like a chimpanzee, but the hair was very sparse around the chest and belly area. I turned to see a sash creature that was at least 8 to 9 feet tall, and it was dragging a lifeless body into the deep forest, and it was the body of the creature who came for me." Now, in another report of a Sasquatch death, there is an amazing account that's shared by Janet Carter, who many of you will know from the Carter Farm cases in America. For those who don't, here's a quick rundown. Now, Janice Carter first encountered a Bigfoot when she was 7 years old. She was playing on her grandfather's farm in rural Tennessee when she literally ran into one of the creatures. Frozen in fear, Janice was rescued by her grandfather, who rushed to her side. He wasn't scared of the creature, and he just stared at it until the creature backed down and moved away. A year or so later, her grandfather took her out to the top of a nearby hill to show her the creature again. He brought table scraps to feed it. He sat the plate on the ground and backed away while it came forward and ate. As the time went on, Janice came to realise that there were several of the creatures who she calls her forest friends living on the farm. Her grandfather had first befriended them in the 1940s when he rescued an injured juvenile and nursed him back to health. He named the little creature Fox, and many years later, when her grandfather became ill and could no longer go out, Fox would come and sleep under the family mobile home, sometimes destroying the underpinning and the heating ducts. When her grandfather passed away, Janice took up the responsibility for feeding and interacting with the creatures. As she did this, Janice became more accepted by the Bigfoot clan and would often spend time with them. She became close with one of the females who was carrying a child, but sadly this was not to be. And Janice attended the burial of a stillborn baby Bigfoot. The whole clan began digging a hole with their bare hands and with pointed sticks. The creatures then buried the infant. For a long while after the burial, the mother would deliver food to the grave, as if expecting the baby to eat. Now, this suggests that Bigfoot may even have a concept of the afterlife. On the 7th of December 2012, it was reported that Fox the Bigfoot had died, and a number of people in the know were with Janice when he passed away. Now, Robert Lindsay stated, and I don't know how true this is, I was a part of the group that visited Fox while he was dying, and they needed to share his story and get it out there. There was myself and Sally Ramey and a few other people. I was invited because I work in the environmental field and was open-minded about the existence of Sasquatch. I'd never seen one until that day, but I heard many stories about them in the area. The goal of my being included was part of a larger goal, that being to get as many credible experts in the field to believe in these creatures. We hiked into the area and saw a large hole. I was later told this was the hole where Fox was going to be buried upon his passing. This was located at the base of a rocky ledge. There were 3 or 4 trees by the ledge, and it was an area that would not wash away over the course of time from rain or erosion. The creatures buried their dead, and John began shaking when he saw the hole. He later said this was because he finally saw proof of what many people had believed for years. We walked past this area, saw a number of Sasquatch. A male and female were on each side of Fox, with the juveniles peeking behind the trees. He said, I then saw Fox had extremely swollen feet and looked almost like he was stricken with gout. His feet were bleeding as he lay on the ground. We had to wait for him to make a sound, and then we approached him very slowly. We each had a gift or an offering for Fox. We stopped at the local store on our way to the area to buy some things Fox had come to like over the years. We each carried one item and laid it next to him upon entering the area. The items included a bag of chewing tobacco, some peanut butter, and some type of shortbread. Now the bag of tobacco was opened and Fox put the whole pouch into his mouth. He never even bothered to spit, and he ate the peanut butter while having the tobacco in his mouth. Fox spoke in a weird dialect with the occasional word of English. On viewing Fox, John became very emotional and began to cry. He had a difficult time maintaining his composure, and tears were rolling down his cheeks. It was exciting and almost frightening. I admit I was shaking the entire time. I didn't want to do anything that may anger them. I did notice that the male Sasquatch are very dominant with the females. The male Sasquatch struck the female when she got too close to the gifts that we'd brought for Fox. He became very angry. Now, Janice has stated that only herself and her daughter and one other female visited Fox and his clan when he died. And as of yet, there is no answer to the mystery of Fox or his clan. We only have internet sources, which are often muddled or incorrect. And unless we speak to Janice herself, we'll never know, will we? I did find another report from many years ago where a father shot a Bigfoot creature that was on his land. This happened in 1928, and the story was reported by Bill Mason of Winnipeg on behalf of the witness. It's a transcript of a telephone interview he did with the woman that explained how her father had shot and killed a strange creature on their farm decades before. The lady was called Mrs. Joyce A. Russell, and she gave Bill Mason the following information. She said, I'm 82 now, but back in 1927 or 1928, while living on a farm in the area of Marshand, Manitoba, 8 to 10 miles east of town, her father shot and killed a strange creature. She said that it was about 5.5 feet tall, with a fat belly and long arms, and it was covered in long, oily hair. Joyce said she remembered how the hair, felt. Its eyes were all black, with no white showing, which she found odd. And she said that she remembered this creature hanging around the farm for a long time that summer, and her father was afraid for the family cow, so he finally shot the creature. She remembered that her two brothers and her father went and buried the creature in the bush behind the farm, in an area where they normally buried trash. She tagged along being young, and she remembered, when questioned further, the body laying on its back with its eyes and mouth open. He'd been shot in the upper back. I asked her if she thought it might have been human, to which she replied, at the time, we thought it may have been, but my father wanted to get rid of it as quickly because of the smell it was making. He thought it was rolling in manure in the field where he kept the livestock. It stunk so bad. She recalled this thing being around the farm in the evenings and mornings, and remembered the strange sounds that it made. It made hoots, and the sound, she said, was almost a wee sound. She claimed it was a sad sound, not frightening. As to the site of the buried body, she recalls it being in a clump of evergreen trees behind and away from the farm buildings, where all the waste was put. This was all relayed to Bill via phone call, as she was visiting Winnipeg from the BC interior, and had seen one of the cards that he'd used to distribute around various places at the time. This is a strange report, but it happened so long ago that the details are now difficult, if not impossible, to follow up on. At the time, Bill questioned some old-timers in the area, and they all recalled nothing about this. But to be fair, if the family kept it to themselves, that is not surprising, I suppose. Some of the experiences we have heard about tonight are mind-blowing, horrifying, and also sad. I believe each individual creature, just like us humans, have many sides to their makeup. Each witness also is seeing this creature from their point of view only, and sometimes for a split second. I don't think it's fair to state any behaviour, trait, or habit as a complete blank slate fact, as each case is uniquely different, as are the circumstances they happen in. Now, if you've enjoyed tonight's topic, or you have any questions for me about it, or a new theory I didn't touch on, please get in touch so I can include it in a future podcast. That always goes for anyone else wishing to share their experience with you all, their research and theories. Just get in touch below. And at a later date, we can look at the frequently asked questions that surround the dogman or bipedal wolf. So send me your questions, folks. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you want to see more uploads like this, make sure you subscribe. It really helps to grow the channel. Please leave a comment or share, as this helps too. If you want earlier or exclusive content, check out my many sites in the one handy link in the description below. So thank you all for joining me tonight. Whether you are a new listener or a returning subscriber, we really appreciate you tuning in. I will be back on the same day, same time, next week, with more cases from the BBR case files. Good night, everyone.